Hi, I'm Dr. Thomas Armstrong, and I'm making a series of short videos to introduce my new book, The Power of Neurodiversity: Unleashing the Advantages of Your Neurodivergent Brain. This is a completely revised and updated version, second edition of a book that I originally wrote in 2010. The topic of this video will be the strengths of people with intellectual disabilities. As a part of my book, I borrowed a concept from evolutionary biology called niche construction, which talks about animals in the wild who build environments for themselves so that they can be who they are, so they can survive essentially. And, we've many examples out there. Birds building nests, spiders spinning webs, bees building hives, ants building anthills, beavers building dams. They're all creating environments that maximize their abilities and minimize their difficulties. And I've taken this concept and I've applied it to human ecology and looked at ways in which neurodivergent individuals can create environments for themselves or have other people create those environments for them that really allow them optimal functioning, where in fact they at least half of the time they're making the world fit their uniqueness instead of always having to fit into the world around them, which seems to be what a lot of remedial kinds of things are that go on with respect to neurodivergent people. At any rate, I've identified 8 components of positive niche construction, and I talk about them in some of my other videos. I'm going to focus on one, strength awareness, and I'm going to look at strengths in terms of people with intellectual disabilities. This issue of intellectual disabilities is an important one, and it's especially important in terms of all the other diversities, that when it comes to intellectual diversity or intellectual disability, we really emphasize the strengths because there's a history in America and in Europe of people with intellectual disabilities just having all their negativities enhanced and pejorative terms used to describe them. And it probably all started with the IQ testing early in the 20th century when Stanford psychologists and others many of whom were eugenicists, who believed that you could weed out the unfortunate but dispensable individuals on the low side of the bell curve, and perhaps breed more of those on the other side of the curve. So we had these eugenicists, and we had them using terms that were not very complimentary. Intellectual disabled people were referred to, and I'll show you this illustration here of the idiot, the low-grade imbecile, the medium imbecile, the high-grade imbecile, and at the very top, the moron. And these were scientific terms that were used by psychiatrists and medical doctors that were associated with specific IQ scores. And so many people with intellectual disabilities were given these names, these descriptions of themselves, very demeaning. And it got very serious in the 20s especially, when there were programs in different states forcing women to be sterilized if they were feeble-minded or had one of these descriptions, were a moron or an imbecile or an idiot. In 1927, the Supreme Court actually upheld a state ruling that went ahead with the forced sterilization of a woman who was deemed to be feeble-minded. And I'll just, have to tell you, ask yourself to brace yourself for these statements I'm going to show you. The good news is that in the 1980s, a Harvard psychologist and educator named Howard Gardner took on the image of the concept of IQ testing, saying it's far too limited of a person's potential, and that there were at least 8 different intelligences that needed to be included in any estimation of human capability. And these included intelligences of words, of numbers and concepts, musical intelligence, artistic or picture intelligence, physical or kinesthetic intelligence, interpersonal or social intelligence, intrapersonal or sort of intuitive intelligence, and the intelligence of nature, the person that has a knack for knowing plants and animals and can find their way around in natural settings. So this really provides a new map so that we can start to look in greater detail at the specific strengths of individuals with intellectual disabilities. We don't need to be hemmed in by the IQ test and all of its limitations. So what I want to do in the rest of this video is share with you some of the strengths that are associated with intellectual disabilities. First, many people with intellectual disabilities have a capacity for dramatic expression. We can particularly see this in Down syndrome, which is the most common form of intellectual disability. This is Pablo Pineda, I think. He is an actor who's received awards all over his native country, Spain. And he was also the first person with Down syndrome to acquire a university degree in Europe. This is Paula Sage, who's also an actor, who was the first person with Down syndrome to ever win a BAFTA award. A BAFTA is the Oscar, what they call the Oscars in the United Kingdom. This photo shows Zach Gottsagen with Shia LaBeouf, and he was the first person with Down syndrome to present an Oscar at the Academy Award ceremony. Madeline Stewart is widely regarded as the first professional model with Down syndrome. Another strength of intellectual disabilities is human warmth and friendliness that seems to go beyond anything neurotypicals or normal individuals are capable of. In fact, there was a time when Down syndrome was referred to as Prince Charming syndrome because of their warmth and their human capacity for caring and bringing positive energy into any interpersonal encounter that they were involved with. Also, another form of intellectual disability is called Prader-Willi syndrome. These individuals are known for their caring, their caregiving abilities, and they often work in daycare settings, in centers for the elderly, and in other caregiving situations. Another strength of intellectual disabilities is in the arts, music, and so on. Music, the visual arts, theater, as we've seen. Here is Gloria Lenhoff. She has an intellectual disability called Williams syndrome, which affects 1 in every 9,000 people. And people with Williams syndrome have a very uneven cognitive profile. Their verbal skills can be very well developed. They have interesting vocabularies. They have gregarious nature in terms of their interpersonal intelligence, but more than anything, their musical capabilities or musical intelligences seems to be most evident. And there have been many studies done in the scientific journals on both the interest and the capability of people with Williams syndrome. Many of them have perfect pitch. Some of them compose. Gloria Lenhoff sings, and she plays, as you can see, the accordion. And she sings opera in 29 different languages, including Chinese. She knows thousands of songs. One might call her a savant, but her parents suggest that she isn't a savant, that she just worked really hard to become the person that she is, and she performs in concerts around the world. Gloria's father was so struck by the musical capabilities of individuals with Williams syndrome that he was involved in the founding of a school called the Berkshire Hills Music Academy. And this is an academy for young adults who have intellectual or developmental disabilities, and that may include Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, Williams syndrome, etc. And the emphasis in this school is twofold. First, the focus is on music, on developing their musical interests and capabilities. And the second focus is on independent living skills, learning how to take the bus around town, learning how to keep a checkbook, learning how to keep your household neat and clean. I flunk on that one. But at any rate, this is really important, what the school does, because they help these individuals adapt to the world around them half of the time, and the other half, they're making the world adapt to them. Their musical gifts are being encouraged, accentuated. I had the pleasure of visiting the school 3 or 4 years ago and was just in awe at the capabilities and the talents, particularly the musical talents. There was music everywhere at the graduation ceremonies, and it just was very exciting to be in an environment where, you know, using the old stereotypes, people would be saying, well, these people aren't very capable of very much, and you hear them playing wonderful music. I remember in particular them playing Brahms' First Symphony, which is one of my favorite symphonies, and you know, being inspired by them. They had a student who did a CD recording of tunes from the Andes Mountains in South America. So I see this as an exemplar for a school that can be directed toward and emphasize the strengths of those with intellectual capabilities. There need to be more schools like this. And this is Sujit Desai, who has Down syndrome, and he's the first person with Down syndrome to play at Carnegie Hall. He plays 7 different instruments. And this is Isabella Springmule Tejada, who is the first fashion designer with Down syndrome to have her work showcased at London Fashion Week. Another gift among people with intellectual disabilities is a certain entrepreneurial savvy that we're beginning to see more and more examples of. This is Susie Sokolsky. She lives in Fairmont, Minnesota, and she was working as a host for a local hotel, and she was giving away samples of these nut kernels, corn nuts essentially, that she had baked at home. And they were so popular with the guests that she decided to go into business for herself. And now she has, and I'll show you because I'm a personal customer of hers, Sunshine Susie's kettle nuts, and they're very good. This box comes with 40 packs, and yeah, 30 or 40 packs, I forget. At any rate, they're very tasty. They have kind of a little salty and a little sweet kind of taste to them. And most of all, what I like best is their crunchy character. So she has this business going, sending She has a mail order service sending these products around the world. She's a motivational speaker, and she's really realizing a lot of her potentials. This is Colette DeVito, who has created her own hugely successful cookie business called Colette's Cookies. And Tim Harris, shown here with President Obama, is an athlete who's won gold at the Special Olympics and is the only person with Down syndrome that we know about at present to have owned his own restaurant. Finally, another strength or skill of intellectual disabilities is advocacy skills. Many individuals, particularly with Down syndrome, have been strong advocates for their disability and for their difference. Here are 4 of these strong advocates for Down syndrome. The first one in the upper left-hand quadrant is Jason Kingsley. He was an actor on United States television, and he's the co-author of a book called Count Us In, Growing Up with Down Syndrome. Then going clockwise, the next person is Frank Stevens, and he's shown here testifying before a congressional committee. And he took a very active role as being an advocate for Down syndrome. He encountered Ann Coulter, one of the political voices of Washington at that time, for her using the R word and disparaging people in that way. And he also worked with a comedian, Gary Owen, whose comedy routine was also disparaging. Sujit Desai, we've already mentioned, and then Chris Burke was actually lured into acting in drama from Jason Kingsley's influence, and he became the first actor on a primetime American television show, the show Life Goes On, where he played Corky Thatcher, I believe his name was. And at any rate, he's a strong spokesman for the Down Syndrome Association. He writes and co-edits his newsletter. He has his own musical group that tours widely. And so all of these individuals are very strong advocates. So that's just a little taste of what the strengths in relationship to intellectual disabilities are. And I think we've just, touched the tip of the iceberg. Something is changing, something is different in what's going on with our understanding of neurodiversity and intellectual disabilities. We're beginning to see now people writing books with Down syndrome and winning awards in different fields, going to college now and earning degrees. I didn't mention several United States students who have earned college degrees from 4-year institutions. But they're really beginning to change our outlook of what is possible for an individual with an intellectual disability. And we need to do what we can in the field of neurodiversity to support that need and to really change our own stereotypes that have been born of this long, hard, and heavy pejorative background that we've had in IQ testing and labels like moron and so forth. So anyway, I talk about these things and other things related to intellectual disabilities and other diversities in the book, The Power of Neurodiversity. I hope you get the book. I hope you share it with your families, with your teachers, with your coworkers, with your therapists, and that it is helpful in your understanding and celebrating and being an advocate for neurodiversity. One of the things I did in the book was create an inventory or a checklist called an Adult Neurodiversity Strengths Checklist. It consists of 200 items, and they're all strengths. And I wanted to write this because I've seen a lot of checklists. I was a special ed teacher for 5 years, and so many of the assessments we gave to kids in special ed were negative. We wanted to find out what they couldn't do. We wanted to find out, what we needed to draw up objectives for. And that's very well and good, but for the kids, from the kids' point of view, it was rather demeaning. And so I thought, well, kids really need, especially if they're having difficulty in a situation, they need to be surrounded by people who see the best in them. And so I think this inventory is particularly important for individuals with intellectual disabilities because they can go through it or someone can help them through it and they can find scores of things that they're good at. And that's important, very important for building a foundation in terms of being able to realize your potentials. If you'd like to receive a copy of this strengths checklist, just go to my website, which is institute4learning.com, the number 4, institute, the number 4 learning.com, and go to my homepage or my blog page and sign up to receive my blog posts, and you'll automatically receive a copy of this 200-item neurodiversity strengths checklist. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, for watching. I hope the information has been useful to you, and I hope that you take your knowledge of neurodiversity and go forth to promote it, to celebrate it, and help others achieve their dreams in life. Thanks so much.